Hey everybody, Mitch here. Today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how to convert the Atlas Carbon two-wheel drive into an Atlas Carbon four-wheel drive. So not only do I use this board for pleasure and transportation, I also use this board for work as I am a videographer and professional photographer. And at first I was a bit skeptical to whether or not I needed this board to be converted into four-wheel drive. But once I made the conversion, I was actually really blown away with how much of a difference it actually makes. The acceleration is so much faster on the four-wheel drive, and I'm usually needing to start and stop quite quickly in the work that I'm doing, and also use the board for off-roading. And I've just found that the board responds both with acceleration and braking to my needs so much better once it's converted over to the four-wheel drive system. So there's only two things you're going to need to get from Exway to make the conversion from the two-wheel drive to the four-wheel drive. The first one is a new ESC, and the next one is a new drivetrain. Also, I just want to say I've had this system previously installed on this board. I took it off just for the sake of this tutorial, so that's why it might look a little used. So the first step is to remove the bolts that are holding the drivetrain to the actual board. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so now that I've taken out those bolts, you can see that the drivetrain is loose in here, but it's not free to actually pop out. So you have to actually loosen the nuts off of the bushings and the actual trucks and pull the system apart. So let's do that next. And just like that, you have the front drivetrain off, and it's time for the next step. Okay, so the next step is going to be popping off this plastic cover in order to install the new ESC. So in order to access that guard underneath, we actually have to take off the top plate of the board. So that's what we're going to do now, is remove all the screws and take off the plate. So now that the screws are out, you should be able to pop off the front cover. Might just need some help prying it open. And just like that, off comes the top plate. Also, I just want to point out there's no specific or official order you need to do these steps in. Basically, everything just has to get done, and I'm just doing it in the way that suits me best. So now that the top plate is off, you'll notice you have some wires in here. You can just put those aside for now. That's where we're going to connect the new ESC to. So there's two wires, a red and a black. Now you're going to be able to see the plate that we need to remove from the bottom of the board. And there's 4 screws right here that we're gonna have to remove. So let's go ahead and do that. While I'm removing these, I just wanna point out these screws are actually different to the ones you put in with the new ESC. So make sure once you remove these, you just put them aside and use the new screws that come with the ESC. So as I'm undoing the last screw here, I can already feel that the plate is dropping out the bottom. I just want to point out the first time I removed this plate, it was extremely frustrating as I had removed all 4 of these screws and the plate was still sitting there. So I ended up trying to push it out many different ways. I wasn't sure if it slid out or if it dropped down. So if you're experiencing that, the trick I found was to take a hot air gun or a hair dryer and actually blew around the plate on the outside for quite a few minutes with hot air in order to, just warm up the adhesive that's on there. And then you'll see that the actual plate drops directly down once it's warm enough. You might need to apply some pressure from the top in order to pop it down, but don't get too frustrated. Just apply heat and continuing to put pressure on it once all those screws are out. Okay, we're doing good. So the next step is to install the new ESC. As you can see when you open this and take it out, it does look quite intimidating. There's a lot of wires. If you're new to this, it can seem rather overwhelming, but don't worry, there's only a couple connections we need to make in order for this board to work, so just follow along. Okay, so the only 2 things we really need to worry about here is the red wire and the black wire. These are your power wires, and those are simply going to connect to the wires that are already waiting for you on this end of the board. So what I'm gonna do next is actually install this from the bottom and just pull the wires through and put my screws into the screw holes in order to get it nice and firm, and then I'll make the connections afterwards. So when you're putting this in, just make sure that you're gonna bring all the wires through the gap here and don't let any get left behind or squashed when you tighten this down. And just like that, you should have a nice smooth bottom of the board now that that's screwed in. So it looks good. So let's move to attaching the wires. You're gonna see here that there's a long black wire coming from the other side of the board that runs along the side of the battery. And when you put the top plate back on, you need to make sure that's pressed in beside the battery. But it's pretty self-explanatory. Black is going to connect with the black and red is gonna connect with red. Okay, so just like that, I have both of them connected, and now technically there should be power coming from the battery into the ESC. I'm just gonna take a couple extra precautions and put some electrical tape around this connection just to make sure there's no chance of anything touching or, yeah, some short circuits going on. Okay, so now that that's done, I'm gonna start preparing to put the top plate of the board back on, and then we're gonna flip it over and start connecting the connectors to the drivetrain. You might also see that there's like a piece of black kind of foam tape that comes inside of your board. I'm just using that to place the receiver for your remote control. This is the receiver. I just stick it onto the back of that. That's how the other side was, and I just thought I'd copy that. So I just kind of stick that on, tuck the wires all in there. And then I just proceed to kind of put this tape, this foam tape, over everything and see if we can get things to kind of stick down and be a bit more set. So make sure that cord is pressed in on the side of the battery. And just like that, it's time to put the top plate back on. Okay, so just like that, I'm putting in the last screw. Okay, done. Top plate is back on, and now it's time to install the new drivetrain. So here it is. Let's get to it. So next step is disassembling the truck setup so we can once again squeeze it through the opening in the top plate. Okay, we're gonna slide this through the board, and then we're gonna flip the board and start connecting it from the other side. Yeah, so we're almost getting there. The drivetrain is just kind of sitting in between. It's not fully connected to the board. So we're gonna grab these cord protectors that came with the drivetrain, and we need to attach these into the screw holes that we're gonna use to bolt the whole drivetrain to the board. We need to put these in with the bolts. So you can get those out. You can just compare it to the opposite side, how it should look. It should be mirrored, of course. So these are gonna go right in here. Now the rest of the process is of course pretty self-explanatory. It's plug and play cables. So yeah, from here I'm gonna start threading these bolts back through the board while connecting them into these cable managers. And we're just gonna start putting the board back together. I'm not doing anything tight, just finger tightening right now, and then we'll connect these cables after I have these nuts and bolts finger tightened in. One of the final steps here is connecting these two plug and play cords. As you can see here, these connectors have a bit more cord or wire than is necessary. So we need to kind of twist the cord when we plug it in order to kind of find a safe spot where that wire is not going to be rubbing on the motors. You can see the other side of the board, they've done this stock, so we're just going to try to copy that or manipulate these wires in that way. Okay, once you've plugged it in, it's a simple push it underneath these guards. They click in. That's how we want it, just like that. And the last one. Okay, so now that these are plugged in, the only remaining step is to tighten down the 4 nuts and bolts holding the entire drivetrain to the actual board. Okay, so now that the process is finished, the next step is using your remote to connect the new ESC to together so you can use and activate four-wheel drive. I'm not going to explain how to do that because there's already a video made, so I'll just put that in the description. I'm going to do it now, quickly connect it, and then we'll come back and make sure that it works. Okay, so I've just paired both ESCs with the smart remote again, and we have power on both ends. Mission accomplished. Thanks for watching. I hope the tutorial was helpful. Let's go give it a ride.